Hi Guy, welcome back CBS Beyond the Gates. In the days when Fairmont Crest still seemed to run normally beneath its familiar sheen of glamour, Anita's crisis quietly escalated like a crack spreading through the foundation of a home everyone had always believed was untouchable. Cancer alone was already enough to drain her strength, turning every breath into a negotiation with pain. But what truly pushed Anita toward collapse wasn't only her failing body, it was the sensation of being betrayed at the exact moment she was most vulnerable. She continued to cling to Vernon as her last source of stability, as if letting go would cause the entire world to cave in. Anita believed that love, care, and Vernon's constant ability to appear at the right time would keep her upright through a battle she never asked to fight. She convinced herself that at the very least, in the face of such a ruthless illness, she wasn't alone, and it was that belief that made her fall so much more devastating. Anita's condition became an increasingly urgent source of fear for Donnie, because Donnie wasn't just watching a loved one grow weaker by the day, she was sensing something abnormal tightening around the family, like invisible wire. Certain things didn't need to be spoken to be felt: the rushed appointments, the calls that ended too quickly, the way Vernon's eyes sometimes drifted away as though he were hiding something. Donnie's worry deepened by instinct, but she was trapped in a conflict she couldn't quite name. Because when a man like Vernon stands at the center of a powerful family, people want to believe he cannot possibly be the one destroying it. And Anita, exhausted by treatment, held onto that image more fiercely than ever. She needed Vernon not only as a husband, but as proof that her life still had order, that the cruelty of disease could still be balanced by loyalty and responsibility. Then Anita suddenly collapsed. It wasn't a dramatic, screaming breakdown, but something far more frightening, like a candle that had burned to the very bottom and went out silently before it could even cry for help. The moment her body could no longer remain standing, every fragile illusion of normal was instantly ripped apart. Sharon Winger was there and Vernon Dupree was there too. But their shock came from two very different places. Sharon's horror was primal, rooted in fear for Anita's life, because she could see the brutal exhaustion etched into the face of a woman being crushed by illness. Vernon's shock, however, looked like the reaction of someone staring at a consequence that arrived faster than expected, to mean struggling to remain composed in order to protect a mask, even as everything behind it began to fall apart. Their presence in that moment made the air inside the room unbearably tight, because every word felt unnecessary and every look threatened to become evidence. After the collapse, Anita regained consciousness in a hazy state between pain and numbness, between awareness and something that felt like instinctive dread. She tried to do what so many patients force themselves to do: stay strong, stay hopeful, keep believing tomorrow might be better. But there are limits to what optimism can control. The medical bills became the first sharp pieces of reality that made her blood run cold. At first, Anita refused to suspect anything. She told herself it had to be a mistake from the hospital, an administrative error, any explanation in the world as long as it didn't involve Vernon. But the irregularities kept returning like a heartbeat pounding against her fear. The numbers didn't match. Payments were delayed. Funds that should have flowed smoothly from her cancer treatment account were suddenly missing. And the weaker her body became, the more terrifyingly alert her mind felt. She started asking herself the question she had been avoiding: why was everything falling apart at the exact moment she needed stability the most? Doubt did not arrive as a choice. It arrives like a cold wind slipping into a hospital room when the door closes. Anita didn't want to believe it, but her exhaustion only sharpened her sensitivity to anything that felt wrong. She began looking at Vernon differently, not with gratitude and dependence, but with observation. Every comforting sentence suddenly carried a strange weight. Every time he dodged questions about money felt like a shadow passing over his face. And when the truth finally emerged, it didn't come as a single slap, it came as a series of small cuts, each one painful, each one pushing her closer to a point where there was no way back. Anita discovered that Vernon hadn't just deceived her emotionally. He had stolen money from her cancer treatment fund. This wasn't the betrayal of a simple affair. This was the betrayal of a man who looked directly at her fear of dying and decided to profit from it. The financial shock slammed into her like a second accident, happening right inside the same space where she was already fighting for her life. It carried humiliation, rage, and a deep sense of being violated. Anita wasn't only a patient. She was someone who had trusted. She had handed over authority, peace of mind, and the most fragile part of herself to Vernon, only to receive an empty account. And a truth even colder. What made it truly vicious was that the damage wasn't just emotional. It carried a real threat of interrupting her treatment. As if Vernon had placed her life on a scale and chosen his own benefit over her survival. In that moment, Anita felt less like a wife, less like a respected figure in the family, and more like a victim tricked at the one time she could not defend herself. And that feeling ignited something fierce inside her, even while her hands trembled from weakness. Donnie sensed the shift almost immediately. Her fear was no longer only about whether Anita would survive cancer, but about whether Anita would be psychologically shattered. Long before the illness had the chance to finish the job, Donnie was pulled into a suffocating situation. She had to stay calm, so she wouldn't push Anita into despair, but she also couldn't ignore a truth that poisonous. Donnie looked at Vernon and felt ice crawl down her spine. Because some betrayals cannot be repaired with apologies, Vernon had taken what was meant to keep Anita alive. And when a person is capable of doing that, Donnie knew the family was now at war not only with cancer, but with the monster inside their own home. Anita, even as she unraveled, refused to remain a helpless victim. Her anger wasn't loud and reckless, it was a slow-burning fire fueled by raw survival instinct. She confronted Vernon in a state of pain sharpened by clarity, demanding a full explanation for the double betrayal. For Anita, this was no longer a question of right versus wrong, it was life versus death. Her fury mixed with heartbreak, stretching every thought inside her until it felt like it might tear. She remembered every moment she trusted him, every time she leaned on him. Every night she whispered to herself that no matter what happened, Vernon would not abandon her. And then she understood something worse. Vernon hadn't stayed because he loved her, stayed because she was still useful to him. That realization struck her chest like a hammer. Yet that same moment also formed a new kind of determination. Anita understood that if she kept collapsing, Vernon would win not only financially, but in the complete destruction of her will. And Anita could not accept that. She decided to fight her illness with a different purpose now, not simply to survive, but to reclaim control over her own life and demand justice. She began seeking legal and emotional support, from those closest to her, not to satisfy her rage with noise, but to build a deliberate path toward exposing the truth. Because Anita knew that if Vernon was bold enough to steal from her treatment fund, then there were more layers behind it. Betrayal rarely stands alone. It always leaves trails, people who know, money that flows somewhere, motives that reveal why Vernon could become so merciless. And just when Anita believed the worst had already happened, she noticed a detail so small yet so vicious it felt like a needle striking her nerves. The mismatched bills weren't random, they followed a pattern, repeating like a system that had been in motion for a long time. That meant this wasn't a desperate mistake made under pressure. It was a plan. A plan calm enough to unfold while she battled cancer, cold enough to be carried out without hesitation. Anita gripped that thought tightly, and in her eyes, pain began transforming into something far more dangerous. If Vernon had turned her illness into opportunity, she would now turn the truth into his sentence. But just as Anita prepared to take the next step and tear the curtain down completely, a new warning sign surfaced that suggested this game wasn't only about Vernon, and the true hand pulling the strings might be standing right behind them. In the hospital room, where the air was thick with antiseptic and the steady hum of machines sounded like an artificial heartbeat, Anita lay quietly beneath white sheets and cold lighting, forcing herself to believe that this silence meant peace. Deep down, she knew it was only the pause between battles that never truly stopped. Chemotherapy had taken from her more than strength, it had stolen her sense of control over her own life. Some mornings, she woke up and needed several seconds to remember where she was, why her throat felt raw, why her skin ached as if every vein inside her body was protesting her existence. She hated that weakness. She hated needing help just to sit up. She hated the mixture of pity and worry in the eyes of anyone who visited. Anita had always been the pillar, the one who kept everything polished, proper, and perfectly placed. Now that her body no longer obeyed her, her pride became fragile, dangerously close to shattering at the slightest touch. Donnie entered the room trying to appear calm, but her eyes carried a tension she couldn't hide. For a moment, Anita assumed Donnie had come to talk about treatment updates or some family matter that needed organizing, because Donnie had always been the one who arrived to manage, not to confess. But this time, everything felt different. Donnie didn't rush. She didn't wear her usual sharpness like armor. She moved slowly, like someone walking on thin ice, terrified that one wrong step would crack everything wide open. Anita saw it immediately, and a quiet unease crept into her chest, as if something was waiting at the end of Donnie's sentence, says something Anita would not be able to control. Donnie began to share the results of her genetic testing in a voice so gentle, it sounded almost like pleading. She spoke as if softness could reduce the weight of the truth, as if careful words could blunt the edge of bad news. But truth never becomes less brutal just because it is delivered delicately. The moment Donnie said her BRCA result was positive, the room seemed to lose all its air. Anita froze. Her eyes widened. Her lips trembled in a reflex of self-defense. It wasn't just shock, it was the sensation of the world tipping violently to one side, dragging her into free fall. Her mind went blank. And then it flooded with thoughts so fast they crashed into each other like a storm surge. She tried to deny it instinctively. She tried to tell herself the test must be wrong, that it had to be a misunderstanding, that it was only a small risk. But chemotherapy had left her weak, and that weakness turned every attempt at control into something useless. Anita no longer had the strength to wear her familiar mask of composure. She no longer had the energy to handle crisis with the cold efficiency she once took pride in. She felt attacked in her most helpless state, as if her own illness wasn't enough. And now fate had decided to pull Donnie into the same nightmare. Guilt came first, even before fear. It wrapped around Anita like poisonous fog, making it hard to breathe even though she lay still. She looked at Donnie and no longer saw an adult daughter who challenged her, questioned her, fought her. She saw the child she once held in her arms. The child she had promised to protect from anything cruel. And that promise now turned into a blade pressed against her heart. In that moment, Anita didn't see BRCA as a gene. She saw it as a curse passed from mother to daughter. As proof that she had given Donnie not only blood but tragedy. Anita began to cry, but these were not soft tears. This was collapse. It was the soundless destruction of a woman whose identity as a mother was being ripped open. She blamed herself, then blamed fate, then blamed her own body for betraying Donnie by carrying something dangerous within it. Donnie tried to comfort her. She held onto the calm she fought to keep, as if one of them had to remain standing or both would drown. Donnie insisted this information was meant to prepare them, to help them act, to prevent worst-case scenarios, that it wasn't the end of everything. But Anita couldn't hear that logic. When guilt is devouring someone from the inside, even reassurance can feel like punishment. The more Donnie spoke, the more Anita felt cornered. It wasn't just the terror of Donnie facing a cancer risk, it was the unbearable sense that Anita was the source of it all. And then, in a moment of raw instinct, Anita reacted like an injured animal. Her voice sharpened. Her words turned brutal. She didn't mean to hurt Donnie, but panic inside her transformed fear into attack. What came out of Anita's mouth landed like blows, making Donnie go still. As if every soft effort Donnie made was meaningless. As if Donnie had come here not to share the truth but to trap Anita in guilt she could never escape. The argument escalated quickly, not because either of them wanted to destroy the other, but because both were standing in the middle of a tragedy with nowhere to place their pain. Donnie couldn't tolerate watching her mother unravel like this. Because Donnie had always been the strong one, controlled one. The one who stayed upright no matter what. But facing Anita now dragged Donnie back into being just a daughter again. A daughter who still wanted her mother to wrap her in safety, and promised that everything would be okay. And Anita, trapped in a body weakened by chemo, felt robbed of the one role she needed, most role of protector. Instead, she was the one who needed comfort, needed support, needed saving. That humiliation lit a fire in her chest. The more powerless she felt, the more vicious her words became, until they cut open old wounds that had never fully healed between them. Everything they had swallowed for years, severe resentment hidden behind family pride. Every tension buried under the demand to stay strong finally erupted like a door kicked wide open, exposing everything they had avoided. In that moment, the bond between mother and daughter did not snap completely, but it cracked with an invisible sound so loud both of them felt it. Anita looked at Donnie and suddenly realized she was losing her daughter in the exact moment she needed her most. Donnie looked at Anita and realized she was losing her mother even while her mother was still alive. The worst part wasn't any single sentence they could barely remember the exact words afterward. The worst part was the realization that they were both helpless against something bigger than love, bigger than intention, bigger than effort. The positive BRCA result became a symbol of everything no one could control: illness, inheritance, fate, and the kind of pain that passes from generation to generation even when no one meant for it to. Eventually, Anita collapsed into tears again. Her body couldn't withstand the storm of emotion, and her physical weakness made the psychological weight feel even more crushing. She felt alone. She felt powerless. She felt like a mother who had failed and was being punished for it. She wanted to apologize to Donnie, but she couldn't find the strength. She wanted to reach for her, but she was terrified that if she touched her now, she would only make the wound deeper. Donnie stood there for a moment longer, forcing her face to stay composed. But her eyes were already red. She couldn't stay. If she stayed, she would either melt into her mother's arms and fall apart, or explode and destroy what little was left. Donnie walked out in pain, each step heavy as if she carried an entire lifetime of invisible damage. And when the door closed behind her, silence slammed down, not the silence of peace, but the silence of distance, of a relationship that had just been pushed farther apart. Anita lay there staring at the ceiling as if it were the future itself, cold, blank, and unclear. She knew Donnie was afraid, but Anita was even more terrified. Because she wasn't only afraid of the illness killing her, she was afraid of the legacy of suffering she might leave behind. She wondered if Donnie would fight, or if fear would swallow her whole. She wondered if there was still time to repair what had broken. And in the middle of that despair, Anita suddenly felt a sharp, chilling clarity slide through her thoughts. If Donnie was BRCA positive, then this result wasn't just a warning. It was a key unlocking questions no one had dared to ask. Because Anita knew something about this family. No one here simply receives fate without a deeper reason hiding behind it. And just as Anita lay there drowning in tears, Donnie's phone vibrated in the hallway. A new message flashed on the screen. And Donnie froze completely, as if someone had just sent her another piece of the truth. A piece powerful enough to make their argument feel like only the beginning of something far darker. On our TV Spoilers channel, I always seek content inspiration for each video by compiling short video clips to analyze and offer my personal opinions. This channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the Young and the Restless series from the perspective of a longtime fan. Through this, viewers can gain deeper, more objective, and more interesting perspectives. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the Young and the Restless series.